Good evening to all of you. So this is the last session for the day, and we have a very power-packed panel here with us. So hopefully we'll keep it interesting and keep you engaged in the whole discussion. When you look at fraud, and I've seen fraud very closely from a banking perspective for last so many years, and how fraud has changed and transformed into something which is cyber. And I think that's something which I have seen very closely, in the sense that if any fraud, internal or external, whether it is assets or liabilities, any business product that we look at it, you'll always find some element of cyber or security or a weakness that is involved. And therefore there is a kind of amalgamation of the traditionally separate practices coming together, and there's a demand on the two practices to come together and work in collaboration to address this problem. So that's one of the things which is there. The other thing is in terms of how the adversaries and the threat actors have started exploiting the silos that are there within our organization, where the teams are not able to talk to each other and therefore understand how a particular information or an event happening on one particular channel is impacting something else. And therefore there is again a demand on looking at cross-channel visibility and cross-channel collaboration in terms of how we start addressing the fraud. And lastly, the automation, the people part of it, in terms of how do we have the right skills, right processes, right technology to be able to address that problem. So what we're going to do is really touch upon all these areas today and get insights from this panel in terms of what they're seeing and how they're looking at possible options that are required to address this problem. So, but before I make a start, maybe I'll request Mr. Sanjay Rai to just give us an introduction about what his unit is additional director for Serious Fraud Investigation Office in Mumbai. And if you can just introduce this department and talk about its mandate and what it's all about, we can start with that, and then we can actually open the conversation for the rest of the things. Thanks.
I represent Serious Fraud Investigation Office. It's part of Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India. The office was established in 2004 after these two big scams which happened in 1999 and 2000. That is Xerox Corporation and Ketanbai Group of cases. You all know in Xerox Corporation, Indian associate, that is Modi Xerox, was also involved. So at that time, government felt that there is no single organization or agency in Government of India to investigate a crime which has got multiple facets. So for example, if you assign this case to Income Tax Department, they will be looking at the income tax angle, police, IPC angle, and the rest of the department from their own perspective. But there was no single agency which can investigate a particular case from different angles. So Naresh Chandra Committee was formed and Serious Fraud Investigation Office was established. We have got in our department officers from various other government agencies like Intelligence Bureau, Research and Analysis Wing. We have got officers from Customs and Central Excise, Income Tax Department. We have got forensic auditors, bankers, and corporate law experts. We have got a forensic laboratory also, and we investigate various scams. The recent scams which we have investigated is Reebok, City Limousine, then the famous Sharda scam, which you all must be reading. This is what we investigated and handed it over to CBI. Now they are investigating further. Rose Valley, and then Speak Asia Online. We have shared this information with EOW. They will be submitting their supplementary charge sheet on the basis of our report. So these are some of the scams which we have investigated. It's a specialized agency, and The only thing is, I request all of you that if you have come across any such fraudulent activity in your organization, you can refer this to SFIU. We will investigate, and depending upon whether ministry decides this case to be investigated by SFIU, because they want their resources to be used on an optimum level. So you can take this opportunity and refer the cases to serious fraud investigation.
Thank you. So with that, what I would like to do is, have a first question open up to all the panelists, which is, talk about what are the trends and specific examples of trends that you're seeing in your specific areas of work. And is not necessarily a order. I would like Shailesh to start, by talking about what he's seeing, and just a few examples, and then we can go around the table.
Thanks, Prashant. So, when you look at the life cycle of a customer, generally it starts from the origination stage. So let me share with you what we are actually seeing in the industry. In the last decade or so, the bureaus have come in and they started becoming a little stronger because they're capturing information about individual borrowers or individual customers, and they keep a profile of the person as to how he has behaved on the repayment of the loans. Now, this has actually prompted a lot of people who did not have a great background in the past to change their credentials. Now, people can change a PAN number. You can, you know how easy it is in our country to go back and apply for a fresh PAN. Nobody will validate it, you'll get a fresh PAN. You can also get a multiple other identification cards like a driving license and so on. And while banks use these documents as KYC and they use them to identify a customer, you can come back again into the banking industry and say that I would like to apply for a fresh loan and these are my new credentials. Now, in the last 5-6 years, we've been noticing this trend that since I handle debt management, we have seen in some instances where people who have recently taken loans gone bad, we figured out, oh, this person had already had this kind of other loan with us, and this is very common, this across industries. So we've been seeing that one kind of a trend. The second trend that we're seeing is with the new advent of credit cards being used with PINs, right? This has led to some issues in some restaurants where people walk in and are very happy to voice out their PIN to the person who comes in to present the bill, and subsequently this will be misused. So that's on the payment side. On the accounts, what we are also noticing and what we get to hear, there are syndicates who are willing to open accounts, willing to wait for a lot of time for the bank to come back and offer them some other services. So they are willing to open an account, keep balances with them, and wait for the organization to come back and say that we are willing to give you another service or another product, and if that is interesting, then they'll latch on. Once they take the product and the services, you will find them missing at it, which is very common. So somebody who's waited for 5-6 months, 7 months, he understands that the bank is now willing to offer me a particular service or a particular product, or I become eligible for something like this. And he takes the money, and after a couple of installments, he would pay regularly to avoid the early warning signals that generally institutions monitor, and they monitor for 2-3 months, 5 months, 6 months, or whatever, and then they again disappear. So these are the 3 top ones which I would like to talk, which are some of the trends that we're noticing, while I'll pass it on to some of my other colleagues who can share some more information.
So maybe we'll do the banking first and then we'll come to insurance. So maybe with Pinak you and then Mr. Bhale, we can cover those.
Thanks, Vishal. I think Shailesh has covered a lot of it on the entire product life cycle in terms of where all areas things do occur. So at an acquisition stage, there is definitely an issue where that is more tackled through bureau coming in. On the transaction side, what basically we see is issues relating to counterfeit cards getting cloned and the data breaches that probably takes place. So 1.5 year back, as an industry, India as an industry, there was a bigger breach which took place on the processor side of it, and the credit card data and the debit card data, the maxstep data was compromised and later misused in foreign countries. But now there is an emerging trend which is again coming up is when the maxstep cards are getting misused abroad, the information which comes along with the maxstep cards to an issuer, that the service level codes are getting changed. So essentially what it means is that there is a liability shift which is soon to happen globally. So banks in India will have chargeback rights for chip issued cards because US would be moving by October 2015. So now what criminals are doing is when the maxstep cards are getting compromised, okay, within those maxstep cards, if there are service codes which are available for doing maxstep transactions, they are changing those service codes, okay, to a chip-enabled service code. So what actually flows into an issuer, okay, comes with a chip-enabled service code. Although it is not a chip-issued card, but it is a maxstep card. So this is an area where banks or issuers should think through in terms of declining those transactions coming from a maxstep card, but with a chip service code with a chip value. So those kind of things are happening. The other thing what we noticed last year was the breach of the payment processor. Although these were foreign banks, but 45 million which took place. So it was a combination of a scheming attack and a hacking and a scheming attack. So eventually what it happened on the prepaid side of the business, wherein the cards, the accounts were opened up, and the cards, 5 or 6 cards got distributed, were procured basically. Now these cards were cloned and distributed to different criminals across 40 different countries, and within a span of 8 or 12 hours, 45 million was withdrawn through the banking system. So eventually, scheming with 5 cards, multiple scheme cards were made, but hackers intruded into the system of the outsourcing systems where the processors were making those payments, and they started reinstating the value. So if a prepaid value on a card, the value is 100 rupees. Once 100 rupees is exhausted, within the system will reinstate a value back to 100 rupees, and that's how the fraud happens. So this kind of things we are seeing that is happening. The second piece which is happening on the transaction side, on the net banking perspective, is phishing is of course there, but phishing more or less, I think banks have started controlling or putting mitigants towards it. But what worrisome is phishing, okay, because there are a lot of fake call centers which are coming up, and the calls they try and pose as a banker and try and get OTPs or different tokens that we send to a customer. Okay, so day by day such call centers are mushrooming, and they come with far well advanced scripts and other things. The other thing is the calls which are getting originated. What we see is some of these calls do get diverted through VoIP. Okay, so they use VoIP voice protocol, VoIP. Okay, and there they camouflage the mobile number. So basically, what you see as a number flashing to a customer, but that number may not be there. So it's basically a spoofed phone number which is being passed to the consumer, but actually the calls are made through VoIP. So these are some challenging things that we are noticing.
Thank you. Dear panelists, I am going to discuss about 2 frauds which are very much hot topics as far as public sector banks are concerned. Number 1 is CTS frauds or check truncation frauds. Now you all must be aware that under the CTS check truncation scheme, the physical check is not traveling in the clearing, but it is the image which is traveling. So the the check is scanned by the collecting banker, and the image travels. So if it's a pre-printed fake check, which is very much like the original check, and what is happening is the original check is in the possession of the real borrower, and this check is having all the CTS features. These CTS features are this ultraviolet ink is there, then logo printed with ultraviolet ink, then there is a wide pantograph, then there is a rupee signal, then check printer's detail and the signature space which is provided. And with the advanced technology, the signature is superimposed on this check. So signature definitely tallies. So it is very difficult to catch these CTS frauds. Now the moot question is how these fraudsters come to know the check series and about the signature. So in daily life we are issuing so many checks. So those checks pass through so many hands. So a person, a courier or anybody, he can take a photocopy of that and the image can travel very fast. Secondly, the employee of that customer, he also can pass on this image. Otherwise, the bank staff also can leak the details, or even the printer can leak the details. So many times this, but as far as our bank is concerned, the check series they are generated through the system, and there is no manual intervention. But many times, if it is not sent in an encrypted format from the CBS to the printer, then many times it can be intercepted and these details can be made available. So, but I had interaction with the check printers. So they said this check printing is not a remunerative business, but it is less remunerative, but more. There is a more responsibility, because when any fraud is committed, the police they hound them. The second type of frauds which are taking place is a fraud on loan against term deposit. So loan against term deposit is considered as a very safe advance, because it is 100% secure against the 100% primary security I am giving advance against either 1% or 2% over deposits. But what is happening, the large deposits which are mobilized by the branches, many times they are mobilized through a middleman or somebody who is representing some institute or some organization. And since the branches are under pressure of achieving budgets, they will be very happy if I get a bulk deposit. So immediately I will accommodate the customer by passing all the guidelines, etc. And what is happening, this middlemen, they keep the original and they give a colored xerox to the institute, saying that nowadays banks are keeping original with them and only colored xerox is given to them. And then there will be a request for either overdraft or loan against such a receipt. And if the middleman himself, he forges the signatures, he will, but the original money which comes, that's a genuine remittance. But whatever happens afterwards, that is all fraudulent. So these two types of frauds, this we are coming across. And the loan against term deposit, a lot of things have come into the paper. And there have been a lot of lacunas. And there is a connivance also from the part of the organization or the institute, which keeps the deposits with the banks.
This is from life insurance perspective. Again, frauds are two types. One is the claim frauds and the other is the payout fraud. The claims, what happens is there is a pattern of claim or a dead body insurance. But the person is already dead and he is insured. So you would have cases like that. So it's pretty interesting. But the number of cases and the values are going up. That's the worrisome aspect. So what we have budgeted for, the number of frauds, incidents are really going up. Probably double, triple, depending on the company size, complexity and the areas we operate. So what needs to be done is again collaboration. That's what the industry is working on. There are negative locations, there are negative list of doctors, negative list of investigators, negative list of customers, negative list of agents, negative list of salesmen, negative list of employees. So if this list is shared, there's analytic, there's a knowledge collaboration, I guess at least we would save 10% of the fraud. So that's proven. And so that's one of the worrisome areas. There is of course the payout frauds, wherein we have typically one of the payout fraud that incidentally was on the check truncation. We had a case, interesting case, where they copied the image and then managed to get it passed. So those payout frauds is only common across industries. There's nothing unique to life insurance industry. And of course expense padding, and there is a lot of data leakage and sale of data, misuse of data. So that's again a very worrisome aspect on the cyber side. And of course, unlike banking, we're not keeping monies of customers. So we're not worried seriously about the cyber frauds and in that sense scavenging the monies of the customers. So it's more policies and the other way around. So that's mitigating aspect. And in the general insurance, of course, it's very complex depending on the type of the industry, nature of the industry, nature of the products. So frauds could be like, again, collaboration is very important. Like I know of a case where there were 20 Jaguar claims, and all through finally found that one particular dealer. So there was, of course, this after series of investigations. So you would have, so the name of the game is collaboration. So we require collaboration at industry level, player level, regulator level, sharing of data. And then the serious problem is the absence of social identity or PAN. And as mentioned in the panel, it's so easy to get a PAN. And so we have cases of multiple PAN, multiple customer addresses. Sometimes the agent would put his own address because what we do is verification calling. Post-issuance and pre-issuance verification calling. So the verification call is answered by the agent. So you don't store the voice of the customer. So you can't just make out whether the customer is answering the call or the agent is answering on behalf of the customer. Or again, customer is tutored to answer the call. So if you answer like this, I will give you something in return. So the whole checks and balances that you put then goes for a toss because of careful planning by the fraudster. So what we see is the fraudsters are much more smarter, much more agile, and of course the complexity is increasing. And with online and cyber world coming in, it's more complex, more frightening. So we must get together as industry, players must get together, share information, and there is an urgent need for analytics. Wherein it's not only predictive but forecastive data also analytical part both. So lead indicator and lag indicator both are required.
Just to add to the issues that Mr. Sundar referred to in life insurance, some more frauds that are happening at the time of receipt of the on the receipt side pertain to some of the cash frauds, for example. In India, cash transactions are still quite prevalent, and customers feel quite comfortable depositing the cash premiums are still through ECS or through checks. So there are instances where when this industry is hiring sellers in thousands every month, in that kind of scenarios, there are financial frauds where cash are being collected and are being misutilized either in terms of delay of the deposit or being misappropriated. Wherein many of the times customers even don't have evidences of the payment made because there are no receipts issued against that point of time. So customer facing frauds which are also a matter of customer education and awareness that while as a process these are not accepted, in the trust customers pay these premiums to the sellers and end up losing money. Another aspect of facing customers is at the time of policy renewal, as Mr. Deepak was referring, kind of gathering information about the policy from of the customers, existing customers, and then using that information to misguide them, lure them with unrealistic, disproportionate benefits that you pay this 25,000 rupees, 40,000 rupees, and in return you are eligible to get bonuses of lakhs of rupees which are due in your policies. And if you don't claim this, the money will go to the seller. All fake stories. Some of you might have heard it. You would have seen advertisements from IRDA that these scholars representing IRDA are all fake. This is a quite widespread issue where customers are losing money simply because of the greed aspect, wherein these kind of offers are quite attractive. Apart from this, we were talking about silos existing. It happens that on the particular life, considering the moral hazard, there are limits that beyond this much of insurance cover, if a disproportionate amount of insurance cover is taken, it is dangerous for the life of the insured as well. So to do frauds in that, but people do that, they take policies from multiple life insurance companies without disclosing that they have taken policies from other insurance companies as well. In absence of such kind of a knowledge, while insurance company issues the policy, it is a moral hazard of the life of the person insured. While the information exists within the industry, it is not available to be used to prevent these kind of aspects. Apart from this, there are aspects where when the policies exist, the information about those policies are used to get encashed in form of surrender of the policies without information of the customer. Customer thinks that his policy is going live. At the time of claims, when he approaches us, it gets to the knowledge of the customer, the policy is already been encashed in form of surrender by simply doing the surrender fraud, taking the information, taking the request of the surrender. All these issues impact both insurance companies as well as the customers, which need to be which have to be handled in collective effort by making collaborative databases and sharing information across the industry.
Thank you. So, Mr. Rai, you talked about some of the high-profile cases that you have investigated, right? What I just wanted, perhaps you could cover, which will help all of us here, is what are the things that you have identified as possible things that perhaps corporates don't do right, as a result of which frauds happen, and what is your message to the corporates? If you were to give 2 or 3 messages that we need to definitely adhere to so that we can minimize corporate frauds. But I know you will also have a consumer element to it, but I am specifically asking a question on corporate and controls related to corporate.
Actually, I would like to share 3 instances. Very funny. We have all the control mechanisms in our institutions, but the problem is, do we care about them? Whether these control mechanisms are functioning properly or not. We have KYC norms, but do we really care about whether these KYC norms are really followed or not? I give you one example. I would like to share some details. India has got an arrangement with Azerbaijan and Iran to purchase oil. The condition is part payment is made in Indian rupee and part is made by dollars, through dollars. Now, a lot of money went to Azerbaijan and Iran to purchase oil. The condition was the equivalent amount of imports will be made by these 2 countries. Now, last year, 9 students from Iran came to India, took admission in Punjabi University. Funny thing was, they all wanted to study Persian. It is something like a student from Kolhapur goes to Pennsylvania to study Marathi. Now, nobody objected. Then they obtained PAN cards. They formed the companies. The companies were to import goods from India.
under advance remittance system, they got advance remittance to the tune of more than 900 crores. Within 2 months, all the money was withdrawn in cash, and now one fine day, all these 9 students packed their baggage, went to Iran. Now there is no trace. Where are these students? Who are the beneficiaries of this more than 900 crore rupees? What was the purpose? Who remitted? Nothing, no information is there. Now everything was arranged through banking channels. You have to export the goods, or those countries have to import the goods within 3 months. Now within 2 months, the 900 crores have been withdrawn. What kind of checks we are having in our banking system? Another example I give you. This, I won't name the industrialist, very reputed one. He has not filed the income tax return from 2005-6 onwards. Nobody bothered. He approaches one bank, obtain non-fund based and fund based limits. Account become bank PA. He approaches second bank. Again, same story is repeated. Third bank, same story is repeated. Fourth bank, all public sector banks. He approaches sixth bank. His name, his and his family members' name is in defaulters list of civil defaulters list. Nobody checks up. 6 public sector banks offers him money, and the story is repeated with each bank. In his venture, a very reputed private bank also invested money through PE partners. Before the investment was made, legal and financial due diligence was made. Legal due diligence was made by one of the best legal minds in India, and financial due diligence was made through one of the concern who is known as Big Four. Now this is the story. And now everybody is craving for more than 500 crores, which went down the drain. Another case was, now it is in public domain, so I can share some details, is Speak Asia Online. In Speak Asia, in fact, there is a group which is doing all this kind of fraud from Malaysia and Singapore. Every 3 years they come as on some picnic, collect some 500, 600 crores, goes back to Singapore and Malaysia. Now in Speak Asia, what happened? 2 very reputed banks were involved. They remitted 688 crores net to Singapore. What was the basis of this remittance? Because some software was downloaded, and remittances have to be made against those against this software. Nobody knew what this software was. There was no certificate from the auditor. The certificate which was obtained was under 195 of Income Tax Act, or whether you have deducted tax or not. Now they have submitted some agreements also with these 2 very reputed banks. These certificates, they had signatures. The remittances were made in 7 tranches. With every tranche, a new agreement was submitted by the same persons, having different signatures. Nobody even wanted to see the signatures. 688 crores. You see, these are basic things. You are not reading the document which is lying before you, then these frauds will keep on happening. And you don't have to be very smart to see what kind of frauds will happen or are happening. Just pay 5 rupees to buy a Economic Times newspaper. Just flip the pages
you will find the best return in 3 months, best return in 15 days, best return in 30 days. Who are these companies? They are the company involved in all kind of frauds. You turn to advertisement column, you will find work from home. Have you seen those? What are these advertisements? They simply borrow your saving bank account for these fraudulent activities. What these Nigerians are doing, they are making hoax calls that I have got some money, I want to bring it to India and all that. You deposit this money to this saving bank account. Who is providing this saving bank account? These poor chaps. Now the problem is, I can give you n number of examples. Every day we receive informers. Every day we just go through all these scams. They don't require specialization. They don't require special techniques. They don't require data analytics or anything of that sort. They require very basic skill on the part of the organization to, they expect certain duties from the incumbent. Whether those duties have been done by those bad gentlemen or not, that has to be seen. Whether control mechanisms are in order or not, that has to be seen. Because if they are not there, these frauds will be repeated.
Thank you, sir. So, Pinak, just changing the topic a bit. Sundar talked about the need for collaboration. So, can you give the recent steps that have been taken in the banking industry, especially from IPRC point of view? And what are the channels that are currently available for fraud management, for collaboration, that we should all tap on and we should all contribute towards?
So there are, basically there are two channels available as far as synergy building or collaboration is concerned. One is the formal channel. Okay. So the formal channel you can route it through IBA or network associations like Visa, Master, National Payment Corporation of India, Reserve Bank of India, or through the peer knowing each other as a part of knowledge of sharing. I know somebody so I write official mail and get it done. So that's one part. The second is the informal channel. So this basically the informal channels do come as governing body or a group of people coming together and trying to work for common cause. So like IPRC, which is India Payment Risk Council. So this forum is in existence since 2002. Okay, so it's almost now 13 years informally this forum has been working. But this forum is predominantly was formed by a couple of leading issuing banks and acquiring banks in India, working together to combat fraud and financial crime. So in last 13 years, we have seen this group evolve in a better way because today we have registered this body under Companies Act and we have got formal license towards it. So basically what we are trying to do is the informal body, we are making this informal body in a formal body. But in last 13 years, this group what they have done is they have come together and trained police officers on how to handle card crime, what to look for. Okay, they have trained merchants on how to handle cards. So earlier we had an issue of card number or the expiry date getting printed onto charge slips. Okay, so those kind of things have got eradicated or eliminated by joint working groups coming together. The other thing which this forum, this group has done is there are various sub-working groups under IPRC. So one of the working group is which works on data security standards. So payment card industry data security standards. So this group, this working group, come together, get merchants, the leading acquirers and the association partners, and then they drive. So that's where the entire initiative started way back in 2007. So today, we are proud to say that, most of the merchants, leading merchants, are PCI compliant, and so forth. We train judiciaries also, so we have done, a couple of training to judiciaries also. Apart from this, whenever there is a compromise incident, okay, there is a common Google group where we share intelligence and information with each other and the member bank. So if bank A has got impacted or attacked, or has seen skimming incidents or card not present incidents on their bank, probably, and they find some merchant is involved in terms of misuse, or there is a rogue merchant involvement in doing such practices, immediately that information flows into the group and the network, and rest other banks to balance 10-15 banks who are part of this group. They try and take proactive measures in terms of identifying how many cards have got used on those networks and try and block it proactively. So this is what the value addition it brings, the forum brings.
Sure, thanks. I think 2 points I wanted to mention. One is that this is one good example where industry is driving compliance and not the other way around, not expecting out of regulators. I mean, PCI DSS is one good example where the IPRC and the subgroup within that has formulated and agreed an agenda and proactively shared that with RBI, saying this is what we will commit ourselves to, and that's the program which is now being tracked by RBI. I just wanted to get a poll from all of you here. How many of you, Pinak was referring to the India InfoSec group or India Payment.
India InfoSec is a different.
Yeah, so there is also one more Google group which is India. How many of you are part of that? Can you just raise a hand here? So there are two, and some of us here. But if those who are interested in payment, related frauds and issues and want to be actively involved in that, then I think this is the group that you need to be part of. And perhaps you can write to Pinak and he can help you to get yourself enrolled. And for India InfoSec also, those on cyber can also write to us so that we can get you, enrolled in that, so that you can get real-time information. Every day there are at least 3 or 4 important aspects of all these areas which are published by individuals, and there are a lot of, and it's purely for Indian users and for Indian community to actually contribute and share. So moving on, I just wanted to get some perspective from Shaileshu on how is awareness playing a role in some of these issues, and what are the steps that could be taken, 2 or 3 key messages that you want to give to us here on awareness and getting that right.
Thanks, Vishal. Adding on to what Pinak was saying on the IPRC, okay. A couple of things that have actually gone right, and it's just not a deterrent kind of action that these people have taken. But I think on the other side, they have managed to save millions of dollars for the country. Let me give you a couple more examples. When we had this incident on the ATM run, and we figured out that there were skimmers that were being put in banks and some of the ATMs and some of the institutions. So it was huge collaborative effort for everybody to get very quickly to work on it and ensure that if their customer had transacted on that particular ATM, to go and block it and get it replaced. So that when a transaction comes in at a later date from an unknown country, you can actually block the transaction from it. That is one. The second other key thing was in the PCI DSS. So you have large merchants, you have Big Bazaars, you have Reliance, you have so many of them who actually qualify for this kind of an audit check. Getting them to understand and getting them to accept and be part of this exercise, I think was a big role, because when you have a breach, you lose billions of dollars, and that's how fraud works always. You'll always have a steady line which goes below the par, and everybody at the management level says, oh, it's very low, so don't bother. But suddenly when you have an incident, you'll find a hockey stick that goes up. So it's important in this space to be alert. And also, coming to the next point that Vishal talked about, is on how do you educate your customers. You see, customers, we as keepers of the funds of the customer and institutes responsible for compliance and safekeeping of money, it's important that we constantly educate our customers that at which point they should share information and which point they should not share information. Let me give you an example which happened some few months back in the industry. So suddenly a lot of senior citizens started to get calls from the institute, and the call would just come and say, "मैं आपके बैंक से बोल रहा हूँ." Now there's a little pause. What's the normal reaction? अच्छा, आप मेरे SYZ बैंक से बोल रहे हैं? हाँ, मैं इसी से बोल रहा हूँ. That's good. So he understands that you are a customer of this bank, and the next thing is he reconfirms back to you that I'm calling from that bank itself, and then he gives you a very nice spiel that I'm calling on behalf of this, and अभी सरकार बदल गई है, तो हम आपके credit card. Sorry, is it audible? Yeah, thanks. So सरकार बदल गई है, हम आपके credit card का limit बढ़ा रहे हैं और एक नया कार्ड दे रहे हैं जिसमें insurance cover भी होगा. So what happens? The customer on the other side feels, yeah, this is very good, new government, very quick to act, and I can see some benefits here. And the next question comes in, and this guy says, I need some information, so on. And the beauty is, that bank has a policy of giving out a token, which comes on a mobile as form of SMS. This guy makes sure that he will call back the customer again when he receives the token. He again takes him into confidence, takes the token, and does the transaction. Now, I mean, from a banker's perspective, you will find it very hilarious, but look at the poor customer, he lost money. Now, every time banks and institutions, and I'm a customer of a few other banks too, so many of them have been sending out messages saying that do not share your ID, password. But if somebody gets a call and he says, if you don't give me your card details now, I'm going to block it permanently. Now just imagine if somebody who is dependent on a card just to take his pension or to take the remittances which his children are sending across to him, he would panic because he doesn't know what exactly to do. Maybe the card has come to him from his son's account, which is in a different state or in a different city, or the son is continuously traveling or so on. So with the complexities, I think it's very important as institutions that we co-create a platform where we constantly engage with the customers and share such instances, because when you identify an incident, this is bound to happen again and again until they run out of the idea or somebody manages to put a complete stop on it. So I think this whole exercise is a continual exercise, and you need to engage with different platforms, different channels. Maybe like today, when before you start a movie which has a smoking scene, you have a disclaimer which says that we do not do this. Maybe this is time when you actually start putting in safer financial transactions kind of messages at the beginning of all entertainment stuff. Where people, it just keeps reinforcing in them.
So I would like to just take where Shailesh left. When we talk of awareness, it's not only relating to the area where we work, because when we look at security or risk, you have to look at it as an integrated framework. So when a gullible customer who is victim to such things, your dependency on a telco is much. So liaising with other sectors also plays a very important role, and that is where IPRC had earlier the name was India India Risk Card Council. So that has changed to payment. We have made it much wider, and now we are bringing MSPs, ISPs, telcos also into that ambit. So that's where the synergy and collaboration will work.
Okay. So we have few minutes left for the session, and I just wanted to open this for audience, so maybe with you. Yeah.
He has indicated that they are investigating and then making it available to CBI. So again, what is the role between the two agencies? That is the first question. And what I was expecting from the panel to discuss the cases relating to the frauds, where severity is more. What probably we have discussed about the frequency, not the severity. Probably what we need to discuss through these forums, that now frauds are outside the balance sheet, wherein the external parties are more involved than the internal parties. If you look at your own data from the everywhere you will be finding this trend, that internal frauds are by and large now reciting. Those are not increasing because lot of check and balances are there. Probably as Mr. Rai was also indicating, that we need to develop capabilities to deal with the external parties like our auditor, like our valuer, like our advocate, on which we are heavily depending.
Yeah, thanks.
Actually, when Sharda scam was referred to, Sharda case was referred to Serious Fraud Investigation Office. By that time, the new Company Act 2013 was not passed by the Parliament. So at that time, we were not having the powers of search and seizure and arrest. So we investigated that case and we placed our findings before Government of India. In the meantime, Supreme Court decided to hand over all the cases to CBI. But Supreme Court was aware of the fact that we have conducted this investigation and prepared in court. So SFIO, because those enactment of new Company Act was going on in Parliament, so Supreme Court decided that the findings should be shared with CBI. That is why this investigation report was shared with CBI, and then thankfully to CBI, they started the case where we left. The real event was arrest of those who were guilty in the case, and they started arresting the case. So probably that answers your question, why we handed it to CBI. Now we have got powers to arrest, search and seizure and everything because of this. Yes. We are now at par with any police officers, police organization. Our report is treated as a charge sheet before any court of law.
Yes, over there, you. Maybe you have the mic, yeah, you can start.
I'm Sanjay here from Tata Motors. I have a couple of questions. Question number one is, we discussed regarding the information taken out from the customers by way of fake calls and other things. But what we had seen in the past is in one of the north locations, genuine customers' documents which were rejected by NBFCs or banks through their DSAs, which go back to DSAs, they were actually auctioned after midnight, okay, in one of the locations. So now in such scenario, customer is at no fault but still gets into trouble due to this type of methodology. So how do we look to secure this type of scenarios? That is number one. Number two, regarding the insurance cover notes or insurance policies, whereby we fund the vehicles. So in that we find that many of the times insurance cover notes are fake or prepared by the dealership or whatever. So whenever any problem is faced, the insurance policy or the cover note is found to be non-authentic. Okay, so how do we mitigate that?
So Shailesh, you want to take the first one, and
Yeah,
maybe you will take the second one?
Yeah, sure. Couple of things that we've noticed, and you're right, data gets shared, data gets photocopied, again gets remodeled, and then gets represented. Yeah, very true. So some of the steps that institutions have done, one is that today when you do an inquiry about a loan for a particular customer, you hit a bureau. So banks have built models around this, which says that if a person has applied for a particular loan, how many inquiries you would have done in the industry. Now, not everybody would be approaching the bureau, some NBFCs do not, but there are chances that most of them who do will go back and check. So there are models which are built around it, one. Number two, what institutions have started doing is capturing information for every reject case. Hence, what it means is that the application doesn't go back. The application doesn't go back. So that way, this is a very small step, and I would urge most of the institutions to do this. When you do not send back a rejected application, you can actually stop others from getting fleeced. Yep, thanks.
Yeah, on the insurance side, we similarly have serious calling, as we call it. In fact, the industry has taken its stern measures against serious calling. What we've done is, there is an ad, as you mentioned, every particular ad, there is discouragement on the industry perspective to customers saying that don't listen to such calls. They're fake. In fact, people have gone ahead and said even regulator has guaranteed policy. So there's a particular slide and we spend lots of money on this. And also there are a lot of campaigns, SMS, letters saying don't share data. And we try and create awareness on that. So there's a lot of steps on that. And of course, even sharing of default service, sharing of fraud. We similarly have a claims and underwriter forum. And then we have a risk forum wherein we informally share. And then we're creating a bureau now. There is IIB, which is created by IDA, and they're far ahead of the curve on the general insurance side. So the cover note fraud that you spoke about is plugged almost, because now we're expected to go for the policies, and with the DMAT happening again, there's a lot of online validation available. But having said that, people need to be aware that they shouldn't rely on cover notes and go and check the policy document is right, or there are call centers available. All the complaint system of all the companies are hooked onto regulators' CRM. So that's one of the beauty of the Indian insurance system, which is unique to world also. So the regulator actually sits on the complaints management system of each and every insurance company online. So if you just complain, that gets data gets tracked and it's there in Savannah. It's called integrated grievance management system. So that's again very good. Positive stuff. And on the bureau side, the data sharing has already happened on the general insurance and life insurance side just in December 2014. Analytics have started, especially general insurance side, they're far ahead of the curve. Life insurance is yet to start from the IIB perspective, but informally the industry has got together already and setting up the roadmap, systems, processes to share data, share information of customers. We're at the policy application stage, not only fraud stage, but claim stage, application stage, and much earlier than that. We have even rejected data like similar to what the banking. If application gets rejected, that data gets shared. So there's a lot of awareness and efforts happening.
Yeah, thank you. So since we want to close on time, I just have time for one more question. And I think that gentleman, you wanted to have that question, so I would like to give that.
Regarding this on the credit frauds, many times things are kind of like this: 2 or 3 sets of audited balance sheets presented, one for ROC, one for banks, and one for filing returns with income tax. So such frauds are normally made by private limited companies of small and medium size. That is what is the observation of authorities, in fact. And many times even chartered account firms having the balance sheets are found to be involved. And second thing is regarding insurance, particularly this term insurance, online term insurance. One finds that, in fact, there is a wide difference between premiums charged by some of the companies and other public sector companies like LIC or anything. LIC, Maxwell, like a wide difference. And similar way, there is also a lot of difference between claim settlement percentage of all these companies. How do we explain that?
I think I'll take the insurance part first. Very easy. So one of the premium differences is because of thorough history. So your claims history, underwriting history, data validation. So it's again reinsurer with a reinsurer. The reinsurer again gives rates. So it depends on the experience, claims experience. So it's bound to vary. But the justification again is the better service that the company might give. Some companies give extended service in terms of picking up documents from door to door, home. So it depends on services offered, depends on the quality of service.
Very wide difference from 12,000 to 42,000. What's the company charging 12,000, 42,000?
So it's possible because of the claims history of that company. So that's one. The settlement ratio, the other one you spoke about, larger the umbrella, larger it's the denominator numerator effect, as simple as that. As the company grows older and more policyholder database is there, your claim settlement ratio will improve and the rejection ratio will come down. Even in the private sector today, any claim that comes up to 3 years, it's almost 99 point something is the acceptance rate. Rejection is some 0 point something. Even that's now gone in the Act. The ordinance, what we have done in the Insurance Act 2015, is that you can't reject a claim after 3 years, even if it's a fraud. So that's the kind of law that we have. So you're 100% you have to settle after 3 years. So anything less than 3 years is anyway a fraudulent claim, unless it's an accident. So it's a planned claim. So that's how it is. So it's not that genuine claims are rejected. So that's a myth. I thought I would clarify on both claims.
I would like to clarify on these multiple states of financial statements. You said one for bank, one for ROC, one for income tax. So we had also similar types of frauds. We have perpetrated frauds on this account. But now credit processing officers, they have been mandated to check the financials which have been filed with the bank, to check with the ROC on their website. And they have to certify in the proposal that they have verified, and they will be held accountable for that. Number two, the chartered accountants who have been found for certifying the fake financial statement, we are also notifying the ICAI that they have been involved, they are in connivance with the fraudsters. So they are also, see, I cannot comment on judiciary.
So,
He has only 5 crores only 5 crores penalty and 7 years imprisonment.
So the last question to the lady. Yeah.
I have two questions. One in line with this, when you are report to ICAI, is any action taken or are they delisted from the item? Is their membership withdrawn? The CA membership?
I would like to share that we had a very tough time in chasing those cases because it was a compliance for our board directive. I had to chase that matter, but about depaneling and all, we have not so far heard from them.
I'm not talking about our empanelment. We of course immediately remove them.
We depanel.
But I feel it's high time ICAI also starts withdrawing their, cancelling their memberships, means it has to be taken up.
They were refusing to take our case.
Yeah, I know.
They will not
Okay,
accept.
I just want to moderate this a bit because otherwise we'll keep on.
One last question for Mr. Rai. Sir, what is the escalation process for, or what are the guidelines for these cases to be handled? Like we have come across one case, parallelly to Anti-Corruption Bureau is also working on, Enforcement Directorate is also working on. They asked the same documents and that took parallelly. So is there, why such cases not come to us?
This is clarify the ICAI. ICAI has got a disciplinary body and it's a quasi-judicial body, and then they have proceedings and then they take action. So if you escalate it to ICAI directly, you would do inquiries, conduct a court, there is a committee, and it's a long drawn process of course, but it's well structured and well drawn up.
So one connected question. One last connected question.
Okay.
So regarding this title clearance and title clearance certificate, now recently there was a court directive. You cannot hold an advocate responsible in case there is a subsequent flaw is found in title of the property. How does it go with this?
Who wants to take it?
Many times there is the open connivance of they may not even go for this. They just say they put some fuel or somebody who goes there and just write down the standard sentence format on that basis. And one of the cases in Bank itself, in fact, one of the fellows, that lady advocate was depaneled.
See, depaneling is in bank's interest. it is in bank's hands, so we can immediately depanel. But what you said, what you quoted, that the advocate will not be held, there again, it's a judiciary.
Okay, see, we're gonna break out and have cocktails after this, so you know we can continue the conversation outside. I just wanted, sorry ma'am, I with Mr. Rai, yeah.
Actually, ma'am, I'll answer both of your questions. One is on the basis of recommendations made by serious fraud investigations, 5 chartered accountants have lost their certificate of practice. One. In this case, what you have to do is write to their disciplinary committee stating the charges against the chartered accountants. There is a particular form to be filled in, and then they inquire into it. After the inquiry, then they will call you to a meeting that is known as disciplinary committee meeting, in which they give opportunity to the concerned chartered accountant to explain his case, and you are supposed to confess your case. On the basis of that, disciplinary committee forms the charges against the chartered accountant. Then there are category of charges, category A, category B, category C. Depending upon that category in which that chartered accountant falls, they will issue him a warning, or they can cancel his certificate of practice also. So that is the standard procedure for this ICI. Now coming to your second question, actually what happens, there are cases which involve various acts. There are IPC angle, there are taxation angles, there are PMLA or anti-money laundering activities. So, say for example, somebody goes and files an FIR. Immediately, economic offense will register the case and start investigation. Similarly, if it falls under enforcement directorate's jurisdiction, they immediately register a case under. In case of SFIU, the case has to be referred by the Government of India because they want to use their resources optimally. They want, so far the benchmark was up to 3 crores COW, 3 crore and above to CBI, and then 100 crores and above on a primary assessment, it goes to SFIU. That was the practice. Even that, if the government desired that SFIU should investigate that case. So that decision making takes its own time. In the meantime, you receive questionnaires from ED, questionnaire from economic offense wing or from taxation department. So that is a, what can I say? I mean, it depends on government of India.
Thank you. So I think we had a very interesting discussion, I think, you know, and I hope it's engaged all of you as we started with that as an objective. And we talked about so many different spectrum of frauds that we're seeing across industries, you know, whether it's corporate frauds or public frauds. We also talked about steps that are being taken to collaboration and platforms that currently exist and what we can do more. And then, of course, we had specific discussions on technicalities of processes. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and it's been a long day, but I hope fruitful for all of you. Thank you very much for joining us. And with that, I would like to thank the panel.